from Lucknow. We have Nyonika, Aditi, Bhaskar, and Muskan. Good luck, debaters. Are we taking a break? All right, let's take a break for a few minutes, about 5 minutes, and then we'll resume. Just make sure when you are using this, when you're not using this, speak it up. Let's just record. Yes. Speaker number one, proposition.
So, hello, good morning. I'm Harshad, and I'll be the first speaker for the proposition. So the question today is it time to scrap affirmative action across the world? Well, yes, of course it is. Let us consider an example. You want to run track this year, and your institution is only selecting people who have naturally green hair, and you were born with naturally purple hair. What will you do in such a case? Will you just accept it and sit down and wait and hope the next year maybe it would be your turn? Or would you raise your voice and say that no, it's not good, it's not clear, the chance should be given to everyone? Of course, it's the second one. That is one of the biggest reasons why affirmative action should be scrapped. In a world revolving around deadlines, every single plan for the upliftment and the betterment of the people revolves around goals and deadlines. Take the Millennium Development Goals of the United Nations, for example, gentlemen. The goal was to reduce the number of people below the global poverty line by 2015 by half of their original number. After which, the situation was reanalyzed and the plan was replaced by the Millennium Session of the United Nations General Assembly. So the question in this case is, was the goal of affirmative action fulfilled? There can be two answers.
A point of information.
Accepted.
So you mentioned the green hair example.
Your name, please.
Yeah. So don't you think that if the green, Muskan, sir, Muskan, don't you think if this affirmative action policy was not there, the chances of having the situation would increase rather than decrease?
Ma'am, it would not increase. Maybe this would have happened if it was maybe 50 or 60 years in the past, but not right now, because the situation has definitely improved. It's been what, like 60, 70 years since affirmative action was introduced. 3 generations of people can study in that. If you cannot improve the situation in 3 generations, you cannot do it in 2 more. And I would be continuing. So what can happen in this case is, what was the reaction to that goal? Was it fulfilled or was it not? If it was fulfilled, then it is a time to reanalyze and for the successor of affirmative action to take its place. If it was not successful, then it's time for it to be replaced because it was faulty from the very beginning. And as for the fact that it is very clearly said that achievements should be earned and not given, there is a great possibility that beneficiaries of positive discrimination may not be regarded as good role models for their achievements, might be viewed as unearned. A role model is someone others can look up to because of their achievements due to their hard work.
Point of information.
Yeah.
So you said that achievements should be earned, not given. So when an individual is not given an opportunity, how do you expect him or her to earn an achievement?
Your name, please.
So Bhaskar.
So the thing in this case is you mentioned that a person is not given opportunities. The thing is that everyone is given opportunities. It's only how you grasp them. People say that we did not have enough resources to avail that opportunity. But what I say is there is never a lack of resources. It is only how you utilize them.
Point of information.
Denied. So the thing is that by parachuting people into universities, their ability to act as role models is undermined. It is also patronizing to assume that people from the same skin color or who went to the same type of school in a society that admires diversity and cosmopolitanism, we should surely accept that everyone can act as a role model. Also, under the policy of affirmative action, there is a real danger of social tensions becoming inflamed. This is a possibility. This is because in the process of benefiting the minority, the majority is disfranchised. This can be seen from the 2001 riots in Oldham and other cities in northern England, and one of their major complaints was a discrimination in the council funding in the poor white areas.
Point of information.
Denied. There was a possibility that more privileged minority groups such as upper class blacks will be favored in such a case at the expense of marginalized groups of the majority community like the underpaid the lower class whites. Therefore, rather than correct racial bias, affirmative action may inevitably deepen it. Also, the underlying
Excuse me, point of information.
denied right now. The underlying issue which affirmative action tries to gloss over is the embedded social problems which put the poor and ethnic minorities in continual disadvantages generation after generation. This policy merely papers over the cracks by masking the fact that the failures of the state-funded schooling and attempts at integration have led to a situation in which ethnic minorities and poor people are so vastly underrepresented in universities. The state should do more to address these underlying problems rather than covering up its failures with a tokenistic policy. Better funding of state schools, real parental choice in education.
Point of information.
Accepted.
So you said that these minorities and poor people are underrepresented. So don't you think that the solution to that is more positive discrimination than scrapping it?
Ma'am, the very basic point in this case is that underrepresentation is not only for the minorities. What is going on right now is...
Point of information,
Let
please.
me answer the first one first. The thing is that when you are trying to give power to one group, you are actually trying to undermine the other. What is happening in this case is not giving equality to people. What we are trying to do is provide equity here, not equality.
Point of information.
Denied. So the thing is, there is little or no evidence of bias in university admission procedures. University admission departments go to great lengths to ensure fairness, not at least because it is in their own self-interest to take only the best applicants, but also to maintain the intellectual credibility of their institution. Any overt or explicit discrimination would be illegal and should be guarded against by using a wide range of admission procedures and interview by more than one academic person. Any charge of prejudice would be argument for a colorblind admission in which the background of the applicant is hidden from the admissions officer so as to prevent any possibility of discrimination and
Point of information.
denied. Instead of just providing the admission in charge with the entire background information of the person and providing them with a clear advantage in the admission procedures. Ma'am, now your question.
So you mentioned in your debate that how more than one officer should be there to administer whether. So do you realize, if I take the example of India only, the population of India is so big, there are so many universities, how can it be possible? Just give me the...
Ma'am, the very basic thing is, even in health matters, people take the advice of at least 2 or 3 doctors. It's not just that you go to one doctor, take their advice and just settle down. It's everyone has a different opinion, and if one person's opinion on a particular applicant is different,
Point of information.
denied, it is possible that, it is very much possible that another person finds the candidate perfect for that job. Positive discrimination will increase negative perceptions of university life. Far from changing the attitudes about campus life among disadvantaged groups, positive discrimination is likely to be seen as patronizing, belittling of the achievements of ethnic minorities and the working class, and serve to reinforce negative stereotypes. Because in this case, what you're doing is you're trying to instill something in their hearts that they cannot do anything without this positive discrimination, and that they need a helping hand to actually achieve their possibilities. And by making the statement that disadvantaged groups are so far behind that they need discrimination in their favor and quotas, universities will alienate themselves from the groups they are seeking to help and will come over as elitist. Surely evidence suggests that affirmative action is actually opposed to the target group, affirming the view that people wish to achieve things for themselves without being given a leg up by the state. Moreover, positive discrimination devalues the achievements of those who would have been accepted into the university even without assistance, and these people are likely to be deterred from applying. While ending, I would just like to state one example.
Time's up.
I'm just ending in a second. The thing is that why should the son of
Time's
a rich...
up.
Okay, I'm just ending. That's why affirmative action should be scrapped. Thank you.
First speaker.
And I would like to start off by defining affirmative action. It is action favoring those who tend to suffer from discrimination. It is also called positive discrimination, positive action, employment, equity, etc. In different nations. Some misconceptions I would like to clear, that it is not just on the basis of caste or on a communal basis. It also includes gender. It also includes people with disabilities. Another thing I would like to say is that there is no such universal term as affirmative action which has universal implications everywhere. So affirmative action will have different implications in different countries. Second, the topic before us states that it is time to scrap affirmative action all over the world. So firstly, the word scrap creates an all or nothing situation. So here there is no question of amendments or changing the basis of preference. It says that the whole concept of affirmative action is to be scrapped.
Point of information.
Yes, sir.
Now, what you are stating is that affirmative action is not a universal term, and therefore it cannot be removed across the world. But I would like to state the example of Rwanda, where there was a full mass state.
Will you please move to
your question, please?
Sorry. There was a full-scale genocide due to the favoring of different communities. How will keeping affirmative action not lead to that in other countries also?
How is that related to what I said about affirmative action? Okay, so moving on, I would also like to say that the opposition is not so naive as to claim that affirmative action is the most ideal or the best way to achieve equality. So we acknowledge the cons, but we argue that it does more good than harm. So it is a widely held belief, the proposition here was talking about deadlines. So it is a widely held belief that affirmative action is a temporary solution and it is not in any way permanent, and it slowly disintegrates after the minority does not need it. I would like to argue...
POI?
No, sorry. I would like to argue that while that is the case with some communities, that is not always the case. If we consider people with disabilities, their state of being disadvantaged as a community never goes away. So they will always, as a community, will be in need of affirmative action. So I am saying that for some communities, there might never be a time where we need to scrap affirmative action.
Point of information.
Yes, sir.
There you go.
So in Malaysia, the ethnic Malay minority
Your name, please.
seeks... My name is Karthik. In Malaysia, the ethnic Malay minority seeks affirmative action because it was historically oppressed, even though right now they are a particularly rich minority. Do you support this, and if not, why?
Everything has the potential to be misused. That is no excuse for it to scrap it altogether as a whole. I would suggest amendments. I would suggest changing the basis of your preference, but scrapping it altogether as a whole concept everywhere, I think it's a rather dramatic suggestion on your part. Secondly, if we talk about...
Point of interjection.
Denied. If we talk about communities where this is it is considered to be a temporary thing, let's take the case of India, for example. In the parliament, there is an impending bill which would, if it was passed, it would allow the reservation for women by 33%. So this, it's still impending. So this bill has not been implemented yet, which means that we haven't even experienced the short-term benefits that everyone acknowledges that there would be from a
Point of information.
Yes.
Ma'am, in context of Indian scenario, the Indian reservation policy has not done justice at large scale till now. So don't you think it's right time to scrape it off?
Is it the right time to scrape it off everywhere? Or do you think that a better alternative would be to make amendments instead of scraping it off altogether everywhere? You're just stating the example of India. So you can't use that as a way to justify scraping it everywhere.
Point of information.
Denied. So moving on to some misconceptions that I've heard in the debate so far. So again, the proposition has been stating examples of specific countries while disregarding the fact that affirmative action has different implications in different countries. So if there are flaws in the policies of one country, it is no excuse for us to scrap the whole concept altogether. Secondly, the word meritocracy has been thrown around a lot. So I would just, again coming back to my point that affirmative action has different implications everywhere. So not in all cases is the concept of meritocracy violated always. So there might also be a situation in which there is an employer, and the positive discrimination here would be that there are two equally meritorious people, but if one belongs to a minority, the employer will be bound by law to select them. So in this case, the concept of meritocracy is not being violated.
Point of information.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, you gave the example of...
please.
Sir, Varenya. So, ma'am, you gave the example of in a case where there are two equally merited people where there's a choice between two equally merited people. But in cases where there's a choice between a person who has less merit compared to another person who has an extra merit, but you give the choice to the person with the less merit just for the sake because he comes from an underprivileged group, isn't that reverse discrimination against that person who has an increased merit but still he does not get his opportunity?
Yeah. Sure. First of all, I would like to state that there is a difference between discrimination against a privileged majority and between discrimination against a minority. You cannot equate the two, because discrimination against a minority is caused because of a systemic form of oppression. They are not the same thing.
Point of information.
Yes, sir.
So, ma'am, in a way, what you're suggesting is to reduce discrimination against one form of the society, you start discrimination.
I am not suggesting that. I am just asking.
Ma'am, may I complete my question?
No. I am asking you to acknowledge the fact that just because in one country this one form of practice is prevalent, I am asking you not to use that as an excuse to scrap it worldwide. So I would just like to conclude by saying that it is not time to scrap the concept of affirmative action, because in some cases there might never be the time to do so, because they are always in need, as I explained in terms of people with disabilities, and it is definitely not an excuse to scrap it worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you. Second speaker of the proposition.
Right, my name is Karthik, I'll be the second proposition speaker. So while my first speaker has focused on the meritorious reasons for scrapping affirmative action, I'll bring out how affirmative action is actually harmful even for minorities. But before that, some points of rebuttal. A few specific points on what the first speaker of the opposition said. Firstly, that some communities will always need discrimination. For example, people with disabilities. In the first case, this is not true for the vast majority of communities who are benefited by affirmative action. Their socioeconomic status can change over time, and it does change over time, as opposed to the status of people with disabilities. Now, on the second point is that they said that affirmative action doesn't violate meritocracy when you're choosing between two equally meritorious candidates of different communities. Well, the problem is that's a case where it works. That is an extremely minority case. In general cases, what it's used for is to make sure that a less qualified person by merit is given advantage over a more qualified person by merit, and that's what opposition has failed to realize. And thirdly, they said in response to my point of information that we should change the basis for preference given to candidates and not scrap it entirely. But let's examine how damaging this concession is to them, that they said that we should change the basis of preference. Because look at the problem. When you have any basis of preference, it's always flawed. Any sort of basis of preference, except for economic preferences, because all of us acknowledge that we should have scholarships for poor students. No, thank you, ma'am. We should have scholarships for poor students and opportunities. I said no, thank you, ma'am. Opportunities given to poor people. The problem we have with is identity-based quotas. And if you change the preference to say not this identity but that identity, there's always going to be the same structural problems. And fourthly, and here's where the large issue really comes in, they have framed the issue of affirmative action as being very different in very different countries, so you can't apply any logic universally. The problem with that is that we have shown that it's structurally prone to different problems. We are using specific examples to show a logic that is universal in its scope, because these problems can happen anywhere. When you use an example, it shows that it's happening in this country, but it could be happening just as well in any country as well. Now, onto my two arguments. Firstly, that affirmative action is structurally prone to exploitation by the rich. And secondly, that affirmative action creates negative perceptions of minority communities. On my first argument, now, this is true for three reasons. Firstly, competition within the community. When you have reserved seats for a community, that means that members of that community are now going to be competing not with the general category, but with each other for those seats. And that means that the ones who win and the ones who get those seats in colleges are the ones who have better schools, better teachers, better facilities, etc. The poor students from these communities who have less resources, they are the ones who lose out because of this system. The only ones who benefit are the ones who are affluent enough that they don't need the help to begin with.
Point of information.
From those who actually need them. Yes, thank you, ma'am.
Sir, you contradict yourself in your own speech. First you say that there should be no basis of reservation, and then you say that the economic status should be preferred.
Ma'am, please understand that this debate is not about economically based quotas. It's about identity based quotas, choosing someone as preference over the other because of their identity, of their caste, their race, or their, as your own speaker defined it. You did not include any definition of economic within your definition of affirmative action, and we, of course, are not opposed to granting people status.
Point of information.
Yes.
Sir, we did not include it. You are the one who included it in your speech.
We said that affirmative action is opposed to this because it doesn't follow economic criteria. Thank you. So, the second
Point of information?
No, thank you. Second reason that it is prone to exploitation is because of fraud. It's extremely easy in certain cases, such as with the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, to defraud people into thinking that you are someone of a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe by purchasing a certificate to that effect, which poor people cannot do as easily. The third reason is a competition among
Point of
communities.
information.
When there is some space for reservation for communities, there are going to be different minority communities who are fighting for that reservation, because of course you have a limited number of seats and you can't reserve for everyone. So when you have different communities fighting for reservation, of course the ones who get that reservation are going to be the ones who have more lobbying influence, who have more political power, and those of course are the ones who are richer and don't need that reservation in the first place. And the thing about it is that on our side of the house, we want to stop this exploitation of the poor minority. We want to stop the rich from getting unfair advantages and free riding, while the opposition wants to affirm this exploitative status quo and continue to waste the government's limited resources on the rich people who don't actually need it at all. Because ultimately, we don't want to see the rich free riding and the poor suffering as they do under affirmative action today. No, thank you, ma'am. On the second argument, that affirmative action creates negative perceptions of minority communities. Now, this is true for a number of reasons. Firstly, resentment. Of course, if you are someone, or if you're a medical aspirant who has been slogging to get through into a medical college, you are going to resent a person from a backward community who gets that seat over you do without working as hard as you. And you don't actually see you don't see their background, you don't think of their background and what they have come through to reach that college. What you think about is the fact that they don't deserve it. This breeds resentment within you, and you don't actually seek to understand their perspective and where they come from. It actually just breeds more discrimination and not less, as opposition would like you to think. Now, the problem is not even just in India, because they seem to have a problem with us limiting it to specific areas. It's also happened in the United States, when the University of Texas Law School admitted students based on affirmative action. 4 white students filed a case, and they sued the law school for this, and because they thought that extremely less qualified applicants than them were getting into law school. And in fact, this decision was against the university. No, thank you, ma'am. And this only means
point of interjection.
No, thank you, ma'am. There's more resentment and more discrimination against minorities because it's negative attitude towards them. And secondly, there's going to be skepticism on the behalf of employers. In India, when you apply for a job, employers now seek to determine if you are from a scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe. They can't, of course, ask you this because that's illegal, but they try to determine from your name, from the color of your skin. And they decide, just based on that you're probably not as qualified as the other applicants because you probably got into college based on a quota. And this means that even people who deserve that job, who are going to be as good as or better than a general category person at that job, are not going to get that chance because of this discrimination that has been put in place, and that affirmative action cannot and will not solve, and in fact is the cause of. So on the comparative side, we reduce this form of resentment because we reduce employer discrimination. Yes?
So you just said that companies nowadays are accepting people based on the race and the color, the skin color. Are you aware that companies actually do a very strenuous background check on people and to be prospective employees? So what is your stand on that? Because you believe that just race and skin color is the basis on what these employees are getting employed.
I'm not saying it's the only basis. I'm saying that when you have multiple candidates for the job and you don't actually know, when you look at a person from a prestigious college and you can't be sure that they got into that prestigious college just by merit, when you think that maybe they got in by quota, you can't be sure that they're going to be as qualified as another person who got into that college as well and is also applying for the job from your perspective. So the problem with what opposition does is that under affirmative action, this employee discrimination persists and this resentment persists. But on our side, when we remove affirmative action, we remove the basis for this discrimination and this resentment, and thus we ensure that minorities are not going to be discriminated against, and that they don't live in a climate that treats them that treats them with resentment and that acts as if they don't deserve what they have gotten in life, and
point of
that
information.
treat them as foreign others. Yes.
So you just said,
Cannot.
All right.
sorry.
So ultimately, we don't proposition, we want a world where we don't actually treat minorities with resentment or any sort of otherization because we think of them as not deserving of the privileges that they have got through affirmative action. And we don't want them to have to live through a climate of hatred because of this affirmative action. And because of this, we are extremely proud to oppose the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Second speaker of the opposition.
A very good morning to one and all present here. My name is Nayonika, and before I get down to the gist of my debate, I would like to address a few factors that the opposition here, or the proposition here, has overlooked. First of all, affirmative action has been geneticized from socio-economic problems. Not just social, not just economical, it's a combination of both. And second of all, the second speaker here, with a lot of confidence, was talking about the creamy layer of ST, SC and OBCs that actually put up this quota. Well, sir, the quota is still in use for them because they're still socially ostracized. I'll give you an example. The Dome Raja of Banaras, he's a millionaire, but he's still socially ostracized. Nobody looks up to him with the respect that a millionaire does just because he comes from a family that used to burn pyres. If this,
Point of information.
could you just let me continue with this and then I'll take them. So just because a person comes from a certain background and is ostracized because of it is the reason why such quotas are in place. Now coming to my debate, affirmative actions, by whatever name we may like to address them, reservation in India and Nepal, employment equity in Canada, positive discrimination in UK, or affirmative action per se in the United States of America by John F. Kennedy in 1961, the whole concept as a whole talks about giving a preferential status to the people who have been discriminated or have been, who have currently or have historically suffered discrimination from a culture. The nature of affirmative action policies varies from country to country, region to region. But the acceptance of the fact that affirmative action program shall have limited shelf life to the extent that they shall cease to have effect after the objectives for which they were undertaken have been achieved has had universal acceptance. I agree. The most criticized aspect of affirmative action by the most liberal minds have been twofold. The exact quantification of the limits as to when such affirmative action shall cease to take place, and two, to ensure that every one of the disadvantaged group has been able to take advantage of these affirmative actions.
Ma'am, point of information.
Just before you guys put me through the ringer, just let me make my point and then I'll gladly take it. The fear of political fallout arising out of putting an end to a group who has tasted the blood of advantage has contributed to the political regimes, one after the other in succession, trying to increase the coverage of the advantageous group and with no end in sight. So much so that had it not been for the vigilant and independent judiciary of our own country, the concept of affirmative action itself would have lost meaning because we left it to the vested interest. Guys, wait, hold your horses. Left to the interest of the political regime, in a stratified society, we would end up coming to a situation where every person would be covered sooner or later by affirmative action. But the criticism against affirmative action is not whether affirmative action should be scraped or not. It's a criticism based on its implementation. So guys, before you talk about scraping the very foundation that propagates egalitarianism in a society, think carefully, because right now, You have given people a taste of what it, you've given people who, let's take a metaphor here. People who didn't have legs, you provided them with crutches. Now you talk about removing those crutches and throwing them to the dogs. Now you fend for yourself. That is
information.
1 minute and I'll gladly take yours. So now that is the point that you guys are trying to make by when you're saying let's remove affirmative action. So yeah, your point. Okay, which one of you wants to go first?
So,
Me.
Quickly.
First of all, you mentioned that we provided a person who did not have legs with crutches, and now we're taking it away. But ma'am, what we're trying to do is that we're not taking it away and feeding the person to the dogs. We're trying to remove the dependence of the person from that and give them with a prosthetic leg so that they can become independent again.
Sir, okay, you're trying to give them prosthetic legs so that they can walk. Fine. But where will they get the resources to get those prosthetic legs? That is where affirmative action comes in. So please let me continue and I will definitely take your question. Now, affirmative action is in place in the United States of America, the United Kingdoms, Canada, China, Israel, India, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Finland, Germany, Russia, Brazil, Romania and various other countries. The UN in the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination has accepted the need for affirmative action programs in order to rectify systematic discrimination.
Point of information.
All four of you have it, right?
Oh yeah, all of it.
You've done one. Okay, go ahead.
So you analogized to saying you're taking up.
I have that one actually.
Make it quick, please.
Yeah, you said that it's like taking a person without legs and giving them a crutch and then taking those crutches away. Are you suggesting that like a person can't grow legs, a community can't raise its status from what it was before?
Sir, I was not making that point. I am actually propagating egalitarianism by giving them equal resources. That is exactly what affirmative action does. It gives them proper resources to go ahead and get a proper education, get a proper job, and break out of the stigma or the stereotype that the country puts them under.
Ma'am, point of no information.
Point of
Not right
information.
now. I want to continue with my argument. Anyway, so the United Nations has accepted affirmative action. Such affirmative actions may be undertaken to achieve a range of goals. Bridging inequalities in employment and pay, increasing access to education, readdressing past wrongs and harms or hindrances, in particular in addressing the apparent social imbalance left due to slavery and various other social wrongs. Now friends, I would like to ask you, or rather I would like to quote Maynard Jackson, who asked people, if you don't like affirmative action, what is your plan for guaranteeing a level playing field of opportunity? Not anything else, of opportunity. Because when you decline a person an opportunity to not be educated, to not get proper employment, to not even have those crutches or to get those prosthetic legs, how are you being human? Let's talk about the fact in a family. How many of us here have elder or younger siblings? Any one of you? Aditi, you have an elder brother? Fine. She and I have elder brothers and sisters. And I have a younger brother. Now, for example, if my younger brother was diseased, handicapable, and was not able to be at the same level me and my elder sister are, would we actually mind our parents giving more attention to a child that needs that attention? Or are we just being selfish by demanding that attention because, hey, we are in the majority? But you do realize the government has made a proper balance. 50% to those who are a minority and 50% to those who are a majority. So by removing affirmative action, we are causing an imbalance in society that will therefore cause more trouble and more discord in all
Time's
the
up, ma'am.
nations, and more it is.
Time's up.
Thank you.
I am Bareni Veer Singh, and I'll be today proposing the motion that this House believe it's time to scrap affirmative action. Now, before I go any further with my arguments, I would first like to quote some people who are very important in relevance to today's topic. Side opposition. Ladies and gentlemen, today's side opposition came up here and said that to through affirmative action, what we are doing is that we're protecting a discriminated form of the society. We are giving them privileges. But they fail to understand that these very privileges discriminate another form of the society. They fail to realize that by providing privileges to one form of the society, we are yet again going back in that very cycle of discriminating another form of the society. So they came up with the history that in history, this form of society had been repressed, so now they deserve the privileges. Now after another 1,000 years, the form of society that today is being depressed would come up with the same claim, saying that now we were suppressed then, so now we deserve our rights. So ladies and gentlemen, they are in a way fixing us in a cycle out of which we can never get out.
POI?
Oh, ma'am, not now. So ladies and gentlemen, what the basic point here is that when we talk of providing affirmative action, we talk of doing reverse discrimination. Reverse discrimination is basically discrimination against a majority in favor of a minority group. And today we as side proposition do not want any form of discrimination. While we are in no way saying that yes, the underprivileged should not be given their privileges, but doing it through affirmative action is not the way, ladies and gentlemen. Now, next they came up here and they talked about how a person, if there's a choice between two persons with equal capability, but one comes from a backward society, so he'll be given the preference over the other one. Why, ladies and gentlemen? Why is this preference there?
POI?
Why is this discrimination there? Not now. So this is the very basic reason we need to understand. If both have equal merit, both need to be given the same level of understanding, both need to be given the same level, both need to be given the same job. Why do we start discriminating between two people who have the same merit? Or forget the scale for the same merit, what is the most obvious case? People with less merit are given a preference to those who have more merit. Yes, sir, your question.
So you just said that why are the indifferences being shown against these two people?
Yes,
they should be given the jobs on the merit basis. So you do realize that the reason as to why these people come under some specific categories such as SCs, STs, OBCs.
Your question, please.
So why do you think that they should be given their jobs based on merit and not given preference over their conditions? This is my question.
Sorry?
Why do you think they should not be given jobs on the basis of their merit rather than on the basis of the conditions in which they are?
Thank you so much, sir, for that question. Now, ladies and gentlemen, he talked about why they shouldn't be given the jobs on the preference of their conditions. I say, why do we give them jobs on the basis of the condition? Why not improve their condition so that today they can rise up to the same level, so that they can actually compete with today's society? Why don't we let me complete my answer. Why don't we go back to the grassroots? Why don't we make the roots strong instead of caring about nurturing the trunk? If the roots are not strong, the tree is bound to fall, ladies and gentlemen. And that is where we need to change. We need to bring in the changes at the very basic and at the very primary level. We need to start first of all removing discrimination from the very society. We need to remove this from the mindset of the society that there exists a caste that is a scheduled caste, or there exists a scheduled tribe, or there is an OBC. We need to remove this from the mindset of the society.
Point of information.
We need to make each and everyone first understand, not normal, that each and everyone is equal and there should be no discrimination. We need to remove the social evils from the society. We need to provide better opportunities at the basic level, the better education facilities at the basic level, so when it comes to higher education, they can actually compete at the equal level with each and everyone. Yes, ma'am, your question now.
Sir, do you acknowledge the fact that for a social change, the prerequisite is political and economic development?
Ma'am, for a social change, we need to bring about a change in the mindset of the society. Now, you understand what is happening. Now, since she came up with this point, what affirmative action is exactly doing? It is giving privileges to the underprivileged. But what about the general? They are having this feeling of hatred towards the underprivileged because they feel that they have been undone. Something wrong has been done with them, and this is where affirmative action starts going wrong, because it starts creating a divide between two forms of the society. It starts dividing the very society we live in, and it starts breaking the very basis of a society, ladies and gentlemen. And we, as side proposition today, propose a society which is one, a society which believes in equality and not equity, ladies and gentlemen. So, ladies and gentlemen, when I go any further with my arguments, now coming to my first point, a very important one. How today's affirmative action has been turned into a political motive. It has been turned into a vote bank politics. And this could be very clearly seen in the very recent example of the Jat agitation. Now we are very well aware of the fact that Jats are the well-to-do society of Haryana. But for the very basic reason that they were first of all enraged because a non-Jat became the CM of their state. Now then they started feeling that because other groups in Haryana were getting their rights, it's our time, because we are the majority in Haryana, to demand something. So what they did was they started an agitation movement, a violent agitation movement, which actually took a very bad step. Not now. And as a result of that, the chief minister, in order to protect his seat, as a political motive, had to give Jats the reservation and had to recognize them as a OBC, which is very clearly, ladies and gentlemen, they do not deserve, because they, considering their economic, financial and social status, are definitely not a big part of the OBC group. Ma'am, your question.
Sir, let's not, okay, in the state of Haryana, Jats are supposed to be very, wow, okay, that's the term I'm going to use, they're supposed to be very, the big shots there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about overall India. No, but that's the point. It's been, affirmative action has been genocide from socio-economic problems. So your point of saying that, just because they have a social status, is moot. Therefore, how do you justify it?
Ma'am, I got your point.
PO is dismissed.
Okay, so I'm not supposed to answer that. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, what my basic point with here was that how affirmative action is now being misused. And now coming to my second point of argument. Let's divide the topic. It is time to scrap the affirmative action. When we talk of time, what do we understand? Affirmative action term was coined in the year 1961. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been 57 years since then. And it is very well a long enough of time for 3 generations to have taken benefits from affirmative action. Now, even if those 3 generations after taking benefits from the affirmative action cannot improve the social and economic condition of their caste, then how do we expect them to continue doing this when we continue providing them with affirmative action? So, ladies and gentlemen, we need to understand that for a race to be equal, the starting line has to be the same, with everyone having a strong base. You cannot keep a same finish line, but say no, the starting line will be different. You start ahead, you start behind, and we'll decide who wins. That cannot be done. With this, I'm very, very proud to support.
Khan Malhotra opposing the motion. So first of all, I'll be dividing my debate into points so that each and every point is sufficiently lucid. Now, as it is, the side proposition has been talking about equity and equality. Let me give you the concept of equity and equality. Now, equity is basically, to put in common layman's language, is the quality of being fair. Basically giving everyone whatever they need to be successful, while equality is treating everyone the same way. Having that established, I want to make an analogy. Now, let's think for a moment about runners sprinting around an oval track during a competition. Now, the concept of equality would have us treat the runners in exactly the same way, ensuring that all of them start from the same place. And this may seem fair on the surface, but we know that runners in the inner lane have an advantage over those in the outer lane, as they have to travel a shorter distance. Now, the concept of equity, in contrast, would have the disadvantage placed in the inner line. In this case, different or tailored treatment is a surer path to fairness and justice than the same treatment. Therefore, the point that I'm trying to put forward is that even though equality is what we're trying to achieve, but it is not possible until equity is ensured. Equity is a prerequisite for equality. Yes.
Point of information.
Which one? One of you.
So the thing is, you mentioned that equality is treating everyone equally. How is providing reservations equality? And going back to the runner...
Okay, I got you. Providing reservation is a form of equity, and equity is a prerequisite of equality. That is the point that I've been trying to prove. Now, having established that, let us move to it. And also, I would like to quote the example of the Pan American Youth Organization.
My point of information.
That has justified that equity is the means and equality is the outcome. Yes.
You've
already let me.
So the opposition team has said that if we consider changing the criteria for affirmative action rather than scrapping affirmative action altogether, it will be better. So can you suggest any alternate criteria and how are they better?
Sir, if I may refresh your memory, you were the one who talked about the economic reservations. Okay, so moving forward,
point of information.
I'll be taking that later. Okay, so coming towards the second point, that is the impact of affirmative action. Now, the reasons in favor of affirmative action are clear. Let me explain this with the help of an example. According to the Department of Numbers in the US, the unemployment ratio of whites is 5.3%, of blacks is 10.7%, of Latino is 7.8%, or Hispanic, and with the lowest being of Asians, that is 5.1%. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the point that I'm trying to prove is that in a broad sense, historical, psychological, as well as social discrimination exist alongside structural problems, leading to unintentional exclusionary policies. Now, specifically, a point of information. Yes.
Ma'am, if first of all reservations would be providing people with a status that is better for them, then there would not be suicides of students who were given admission on the basis of this affirmative action.
So, first of all, you claiming that there have been suicides for people who have been given the benefits of affirmative action. So, first of all, you do not have any stats about the number of suicides. Second of all, a very important factor comes in play. Now, I'll be moving forward towards the third one. POI. Yes.
I'll go.
Quick
So, ma'am, can you please tell me how can you compromise between meritocracy against mediocrity?
I'll be coming forward. I'll be proving that in the furthermore. So effects of, now let me, ladies and gentlemen, if we talk about scrapping affirmative action, let me tell you the effects of scrapping affirmative action right now. So what about the minorities who are currently in high school and are aspiring to be a part of the premier institution on the basis of the current affirmative action? Moreover, affirmative action encourages them to actually move past beyond the discrimination everyone suffers from. And from there, every step they take is a battle for them, and the whole concept of affirmative action is
Point information.
to win it. Yes.
Ma'am, I'll go first now. Ma'am, do you understand when you talk of a child in high school dreaming for a premier institution? So instead of giving him reservation in the premier institution, well, it will become even more difficult for him to cope with the highest level of standard of education. Why not start improving the level of that very high school education so that it makes it give him an equal opportunity to stay on an equal level when it comes to high school, premier school education?
Okay, so first of all, you talk about improving the quality of the high school education. I totally support that. Okay, so you mean that if we improve the quality of the high school education, then the SCs, STs and the OBCs, as for example India only, where the minorities include SC, STs and OBC. Now, if we include the standard of the high school education and we send them to college, now is there not a possibility that they are not being taken because of their merit and not being taken just because of discrimination? Now coming to the second point, aspect
was the proposition not to rally behind.
Coming to the second aspect of the effects. Now, what about some aspects of affirmative action, like specifically for the disabled, as mentioned by my first speaker, by the first speaker of the opposition? How can that be done away with? So, and third effect, that scrapping right now currently would evoke a strong response from the groups of availing of the scheme. Now, moreover, I would also like to address the point of high school education, that improving the high school education that the opposition talked about. Now, you do realize that it is a long-term solution. And to achieve a long-term solution, we cannot simply scrap affirmative action, which is moreover a short-term solution.
No more points of information.
Okay, so now the opposition cannot neglect the fact that the whole concept of affirmative action is not impeccable. But wouldn't it be better to rectify our faults than just scrap it? Now, I would also like to give the example and analogy of how if I burn a bread, I would remove the char over it, and I would remove the char over it to have it, and not eating bread only. So that is the concept. We have to rectify our faults and not only remove the whole concept of it. And that is what the opposition demands.
Thank you.
The reply speech from the opposition.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bhaskar, and I'll be here to sum up the speech from the opposition side. So first of all, ladies and gentlemen, the proposition are like a bunch of politicians. Suggestions and big talk, but no backing of facts. What they are suggesting is that we remove an already established affirmative policy which has been functioning in nations across the world, and to replace it with what? They're just suggesting that we move an already established framework and then we don't replace it with something else. And they're saying that we give a prosthetic leg, whatever that means. Okay, first of all, the proposition suggested that whenever a student goes to a college or an educational institution for an admission, he or she, according to them, is admitted on the basis of his or her condition or his or her caste. What they are not aware of is that colleges nowadays are not so transparent as they think they are. There are severe, strenuous background checks on the identity of the person, the resume is asked for, proper certificates are asked for, there's a screening process for students who want to come and study in specific institutions. So that's a wrong on the propositions part. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start with a very basic point, that affirmative action policies are needed to ensure racial and gender diversity in education and employment. No matter how much the proposition would disagree with me, I will agree on my stand firmly. An educational institute's environment is significantly enhanced and spruced up when there's diversity in the population of students there. Because we need diversity and multicultural environment in order to inculcate moral values and in order to encourage global understanding between the whole populations of students. A person came here and said that two people from the same caste can have different ideologies. I'll give you an example and it might be very funny. Heard of Donald Trump? Have you heard of Hillary Clinton? Okay, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are from the same caste but have very different ideologies. If they are in a boat and the boat sinks, America survives. Okay, my second point is that it is meant affirmative action policies should be accepted because it is meant to be a dose of equal opportunity. Listen to me carefully. Affirmative actional policies were meant to be a dose of equal opportunity for individuals, and the prescription is intended to expire when the body develops immunity against the prejudice and the viruses such as discrimination and prejudice. So this is the basic premise upon which the policies which are included in affirmative action have been implemented. Okay, we don't have proper strenuous policies as such, which explains why policies of affirmative action are needed severely. Many loopholes can be found out. Ladies and gentlemen, let me give you an example from the Middle East. Let's go back to a conflict-stricken area. The Middle East has severe conflict there. Children and women are being denied healthcare, basic education, rights. What is happening is that the majority which is ruling there, the Sunni Muslims, forgive me if I'm being racist or if I'm going against any religion, but this is the harsh reality. The Sunni majority Muslims are discriminating to the Shias. They are not giving them basic fundamental rights, basic proper education, which is actually the right of each and every human here. They are also violating the Article 3 of the United Nations of the UDHR, which is the right to life. My fifth point is, if taken away, as the proposition is saying or suggesting, there would be no such framework within which nations will be able to propagate.
30 seconds more.
Yeah, will be able to propagate or function under such a policy. Just think about all the years of oppression and segregation which the African Americans were subject to 375 years ago. This is exactly the reason as to why affirmative actional policies should exist. We need to understand that had there been no reservations in India, the OBCs, SCs, STs would not have got proper employment opportunities and would not have contributed to this nation's employment populations as they have been doing ever since affirmative action policies were in play. Thank you.
The reply speech from the proposition.
The illiterates of 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but will surely be those who cannot learn, unlearn and relearn. Good morning, everybody. I am Shruti Fogat from the proposition side. So, moving on to the opposition's point of view, I would like to ask them some few questions. So basically, my first question to you guys is that, how do you spot the creamy layer of the society? The second is that, how do you counter the cheats? And the third is basically that, how do you justify the violation of the Article 2 of International and Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination? So, moving on, as we all know, the vision of all Constituent Assembly was very clear to use affirmative action as a tool only for certain castes and creeds or tribes by temporarily scheduling them to uplift their social status. But, my dear friends, the case is not the same today. It was the case 57 years before. But today, if we talk about reservations, if we talk about affirmative action, then I must say that the SC or ST people are coming to the same level of the general caste. So, basically, to use caste as vote banks by the politicians, the affirmative action law is gained by the politicians to advantage by nullifying judgments of the Supreme Court and tampered with the Constitution. What we are doing today is to move into it, not to be given to the people. So firstly, I would like to say that we need to understand that the reservation system not only divides the society, it also leads to the discrimination and conflicts between the different sections of the society. It is oppressive and doesn't find its basic in casteism. It is actually the antithesis of the communal living. So basically the model which we people are proposing today is that instead of giving reservations to the SC or ST people or to the backward people, we should encourage, we should strengthen their primary education so that they actually do not need any reservation in future life. So moving on to the example which the speaker 2 or 3 of the opposition gave about their siblings being disadvantaged in some way or other. Ma'am, I would like to say is that instead of your parents giving, it is important that special care should be given to some people, like to your siblings.
Last 30 seconds.
Okay. So special care should be given to the disadvantaged person, but we cannot deny the person who is not at all disadvantaged. So we should also promote the rights of the person who is to be cared by the parent. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the opposition has actually failed to justify their point of view in why we should have the reservations in our country. So I think the proposition takes away the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, debaters.